welcome to Staying Motivated and Being Creative in the Pandemic. My name is Peggy Dulle. I'm the author of 17 mystery novels spanning 5 genres, and I'm the moderator for this wonderful group of authors. We're going to start by just letting them introduce themselves rather than me reading a script. Let them introduce themselves as well as what they're working on and what their books are. And so we're going to start with that. So let's start with Anne. Go ahead, Anne.
Okay. Anna. Actually, it should be Anna.
Oh, thank you, Anna.
My name is Anna Manwaring. I am the author of the Jade Ann Stone Mexico Adventures, thrillers set against the backdrop of organized crime in Mexico. The first book is called Set Up. That's not my background. My background is the second book, The Hydra Effect. But each book leads into the next, and I am currently about 3 chapters from finishing book 3, which is called Nothing Comes After Z. And maybe I'll talk later about what the books are about, but more about me. I teach creative writing in the Napa Valley. I've done that for about 15 years now. And I'm retiring in January from the college, but well, you'll hear about this. COVID and lockdown has caused me to move all my classes and new classes onto Zoom. So now I'm going to be a Zoom teacher. And I also have a small editing business, Jam Manuscript Consulting.
Very cool. I think I love that your books have the German Shepherd in them. That's very cool. I like that. Very cool. All righty. So next up, let's tell what Hannah's got to say for us. Hannah, go ahead.
My name is Hannah Mary McKinnon, and you can tell I'm not from the US, and I actually live in Canada. So I'm throwing you there completely. Born in England, raised in Switzerland, and now I live in Canada. And my first book published in 2016, it was a rom-com. So hold on, I'm not in the wrong place, because I quickly shifted to suspense. So the books that followed afterwards, The Neighbours, Her Secret Son, this year's book, Sister Dear, are all psychological suspense, domestic suspense. Next year's book is called You Will Remember Me. That's done, dusted, and publishes in May. So I'm now working on the one for 2022. And this is my full-time gig. I have 3 sons, I was going to say 2 twins. That's really dumb. 16-year-old, almost 16-year-old twins, and a 17-year-old. So they keep me busy.
I bet they do. You know, and suspense, or every time you read the psychological suspense, it gets your heart pumping. It's really good. Nice job. All right.
That's the plan, yes.
And you do a nice job.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So James T. Bartlett, you have to get the right T in there, correct, James? Go ahead and tell us about you.
Yes. Hello, everybody. You might recognize my accent as well. I'm from the same place as Hannah originally. I live in Los Angeles now. I've been here for more than 15 years. I work my main job is as a journalist, which, as we'll be discussing, I'm sure later, many of us have found that their work routine has been completely changed in so many unbelievable ways. I'm a bit of a fraud being here. I don't write mysteries per se. The books that I wrote was a guide. They're guides to LA, and they have a mystery and a crime and a ghost element to them, but they're guides to bars, restaurants, and hotels in LA, which has another COVID element because, of course, now all of those are closed. So selling books and promoting this particular one has been really tough because people can't go to these places, and it's a guide to go to those places. But I've moved on since then. I had a 2012, and then I did a second one in 2016, and then what I've been working on for the last 4 years, actually, on and off, is a book called The Alaskan Blonde, which is a true crime story just featured on one crime from 1953 Alaska that started with a murder, as all the good books in Hollywood, which is how I got to learn about it. So that should be coming out next year, fingers crossed, because that's another thing I'm sure we'll all discuss about, what the future holds for publishing. But that's that's the book that I've been working on at the moment. I really pretty much finished it. I keep fiddling with it, but it's pretty much finished. So.
Yeah, but how cool. An LA book about ghosts and murders and bars, and now an Alaskan murder. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I found the Alaskan murder doing the research for the guidebooks, because it happened that there was a suicide that happened here, and that made me just go down one of those rabbit holes that we've all been down. And 4 years later, you know, I've sort of got a book out of it.
That's awesome. All right, next we have Kim.
Yeah, hi. So I am Sisters in Crime person. If you were in the, geez, I'm really tongue-tied now suddenly. This is my first panel on a major mystery conference, and I think I'm a little nervous. So this was going to be my first VoucherCon, and I was really looking forward to Sacramento, but, you know, here we are. So if you were in the meeting at 12 o'clock, you heard that San Diego is VoucherCon 2023. Hi, I'm the person doing that. So I'm really looking forward to being part of the VoucherCon community now that I've joined, and I'm excited. And pandemic has really affected me because I've had my first two things published this year. They're both short stories. One was in the anthology Crossing Borders, which was my first short story ever written, and it got in this. And it was going to be launched at Left Coast Crime, which got shut down by the pandemic on the middle of its first day, right before our launch party. And then, of course, I got accepted into the VoucherCon anthology with my second short story, which was going to premiere at this conference, and we were going to have panels and all sorts of excitement. And I was so honored to be in it because some of my favorite authors happened to also be in it. And I mean, being in a book with Anthony Horowitz, oh my God. And then this happened still, and so yeah, the pandemic's been interesting from that point of view, and then I have some works in progress that I hope will eventually get out there in the world. So
Cool. Well, looking forward to reading your story in the anthology. Nice. Yeah, really cool. All right, let's hear from Miss Nicole.
Hello, everybody from cold and rainy Abington, Massachusetts, which is just south of Boston, which I see a lot of people in the chat are from up here, Hank and Lee and all them. So hi, guys. My debut cozy came out. It's behind me, but I'll hold up closer so people can see it. It's Murder at First Pitch. It is a baseball cozy mystery set in my current hometown of Abington. I decided to keep the town because I like it, and everybody seems to be okay with it. Nobody's yelled at me yet. Book 2 in the series, it is actually going to be a series, is scheduled to come out next spring, hopefully in time for baseball season. If we have a baseball season, which was part of the problem with the pandemic this year, because the book came out in September, and then we didn't play baseball till June and July. So it was a little hard, but that's okay. And this is my first panel as well, Kim, and so I'm very excited to be on with another newbie. And also, I love your cat. I have 3 cats of my own who are wandering, which is why I keep looking in different directions, because I feel like they're breaking something. And for a career, I wish I could do this all the time, but I am a tech writer by day for the healthcare industry. So job security for right now, so I'll take it.
And you know, who doesn't like a book with baseball in it? Come on.
I mean,
America's favorite pastime, right?
It's almost the World Series, weirdly, in November, so go figure.
yeah, Whisper the Wonder Cat might come through a few times, guys.
I love
I
that.
really love Zoom time.
All right, and last but not least, great to see you, Linda. She had a little technical issue, but now she's here. Awesome. All right, Linda, let's tell us about yourself and a little about your book.
Oh, yeah, same one. Yes.
Oh,
We have the same one as you, Linda. Unfortunately, I think your voice is coming through. You're sounding like Minnie Mouse. Oh, yes.
Oh no. Well, you might have to log back. Where's our person? Oh, there's our helper, Matt.
Linda, I'm going to go ahead and remove you and just rejoin as soon as you can, and hopefully that'll fix your audio. That is adorable.
Okay. Well, we'll hear about Linda when she comes back. All righty. So thanks, panelists. That was awesome. And well, let's get started talking about motivation and creativity in this crazy pandemic world. We're going to first talk about motivating. Do you feel motivated or less motivated? Let's start with Anne.
Oh, well, I don't know. Some of it's like a roller coaster. There are good days and bad days, and living in now that it's fire season in Northern California, it's added a new dimension of fear and stress. So I am motivated sometimes and really unmotivated at other times. But I have to appear on Zoom for 4 classes every week, and a couple in my critique groups, and a couple other events that I'll talk about. So I have to get myself out of bed and get to my office, and my office is at home, and get going. So actually I've been making writing progress.
Awesome.
So it's been positive.
Cool. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I think that's probably a similar experience we might have all found. You know, I'm sure we've all had days where, you know, all you've really done is like go back for an afternoon nap 3 times, you know, and you haven't done any work at all, even though I remember when it started, I was thinking, oh, I've got all this time to work. I'll be able to get so much done. And I did get a lot done, which only made me realize how much I needed to have done on it. But then there was a lot of time where you just think, you know, you can really, especially as Anna said, watching the news, it's been pretty grim around the world. And I've definitely had moments where I thought, well, what's the point in even finishing this? Because everything seems so grim at the moment. But it's really up and down, I think.
Yeah, I agree. My office closed in March, and so I've been working from home since March, which seems like just yesterday, but also like 5 years ago at the same time. It's just so weird. And I find that I do my, 6 o'clock to 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and then I'm like, ugh, I don't even want to look at a computer. I'm in the same place. I just can't even. And for me, who writes cozies, it's a little bit harder to get back into that light, happy, fluffy. Everything's fine. Everybody's shaking hands and everybody's like hugging each other. Like it's so weird to write that now because it's so different. And I think for myself, it's been really hard to get back into that mode of writing because, like you said, everything stinks right now. There's not a lot of joy in the world, and it's hard to get that motivation for it. So I'm having a little bit of, I know I'm like the motivation. So I'm a little bit on the downside of the roller coaster, more so than I'm on the upside. Let's put it that way.
My experience was a little bit different. When I have family in Europe, in Switzerland, and I was watching the numbers and starting to freak out. This was back when there was about 150,000 cases worldwide. Now we're at 38 million or something ridiculous. So I was watching the news obsessively, and I felt paralyzed, really. And I had my 5th book, the one that comes out next year, to edit. And I had my 6th one for 2022 to plot and start, and I felt paralyzed. And my husband's very, very down to earth. I'm the panic, freak out, worry about worrying person, and he's very, it might not happen. And I always prepare for the worst, expect the best. That's my motto. And he just thinks, well, it might never happen, so I'm not going to even think about it, which I really, really admire, because it really does help until whatever you don't want to happen does happen, and then you have no plan. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So we were having this discussion, I'm freaking out, and he says, stop watching the news.
Yeah. Totally.
And my immediate reaction was, are you crazy? You can't stop watching the news. I need to know what's going on. And I'm not a journalist like you are, James. I imagine if someone said to you, stop watching the news, you're, what? What are you talking about? But I actually found, I thought, well, I'll do that. I won't stop entirely, but I will significantly reduce the amount of time. And there was one thing I did. I normally write here. This is my office. And we have a spare bedroom upstairs where the internet connection is pretty dodgy. And I took my laptop upstairs, left my phone down here, and it changed everything. I wrote book 6. I'm in the editing stages now. I started it 2 months ago. I don't think I've ever written something that, and I write fast, but I've never written, and it's, don't let speed impress you, because it's, you know, lots of words all in the wrong order, but at least there's something there, because you can't edit a blank page. So I found removing myself from that and almost selfishly, but from a self-preservation aspect, controlling what I can control, which is our family of 5. I can't do anything about anything else, but I can have an impact on our family of 5. And that really did change things for me, from my perspective. I do still watch the news, and still got the eyes on what's going to happen on November 3rd, which is still a source of stress for me, because it'll still affect us in Canada too, not as much as you guys, of course. But I really found that setting these barriers was really, really helpful.
That makes really good sense. Sure. I see Linda's back again. Hi, Linda.
Do I still sound like Minnie Mouse?
No,
That's great.
that's
I
great.
had to put these. I apologize for that, folks. I have no idea what's going on. But hey, it's interesting, Hannah. As you talk, I'm reading what our participants are saying, and so many people are agreeing and saying. And I see everybody nodding.
Yeah.
Hey, stop the news. Stop Facebook. Just get out of all that negativity. So. Great observation.
Absolutely, for
For
sure.
me, Twitter is I can't not read it. So, even, you know, I'm in meetings and I'm reading it. So it's not so much the news, but it's everybody talking about it on Twitter. And I agree with Hannah. I need to find somewhere I can just turn it off for a little while, but then I'll be like, what am I missing? You know,
you get half an hour a day, half an hour of Twitter a day. That's it. Pick your half an hour. You can split it in 15 minutes.
I do social media for a living, so you can't get away from social media if this is something you do, because I do social media for authors and websites for authors, all that, freelance. My other job, unfortunately, I lost on March 13th. So when you talk about, you say, if you just had time, and I discovered I lost half of my income and half of my work on one day, the day after the conference closed down and everything shut down. And I was terribly depressed and tired and exhausted. And suddenly I had all this time, and it took me a while to even use any of that, because it was just like, the change was so abrupt and so unexpected. And then it got better, and I got really, really motivated. I did a lot. And lately it's been a little more on and off and on and off. And some days it's great and some days it's terrible. But I do remember that first thing was like those first 2 weeks, because so much in my life had just suddenly, boom. And the job I had lost, I loved. It was my good, steady, you know, thing that also was just a lot of fun. And it'll never come back, unfortunately. And it's just one of those things you go, you know, life changes, and sometimes that's harder to accept than others, and it really affects your motivation.
Absolutely. Well, and if you ever get tired, you can just do TikTok. Just watch TikTok videos. They're hilarious and stupid. They have nothing to do with anything.
I had a similar thing as Kim. I was at Left Coast Crime. She was at Left Coast Crime. Hi, Kim. And I got home on the 13th to no job, and my husband also had a no job. He puts on conferences like this. So, of course, he shut down probably until next summer. And it's very depressing, but, you know, through 2.5 weeks, we had a mortgage payment due. So I had to get busy and create for me, and he had to do the same. So we got really busy, and between, you know, Social Security and unemployment and drumming up a whole bunch of editing jobs. And then he got some work too. We managed to keep it all going, but the fear factor, I mean, the stress. I mean, we couldn't bend because we were so stiff from stress.
Mhm.
But we kind of worked that out until the fires started, and then now, you know, we've got that, and then we have the election, and
One more layer stress.
so it just keeps
That's such a
going.
2020. That's such a 2020 statement, though. And then the fires happened. Like,
And
that
the killer bees.
encapsulates
What happened to the
2020.
killer bees? I mean,
Yeah.
they were here and gone in a week.
And I'll tell you, facing down poverty and living under, you know, the local bridge over the Petaluma River or something really motivates you to do something.
It's not true.
All right,
One
so
thing that-
go ahead.
Well, one thing that happened with me with the pandemic that was so interesting. At first, I think most of us in the beginning thought it was going to be over pretty soon.
Mm, yeah.
And so we were kind of panicked, but we thought we saw an end in sight, and we don't. But I always have my writing scheduled out a year or two in advance. I do 2 books a year usually, but something new, totally new, cropped up as a result of all of this. And that was, I started what I called a Shades of Hope novella collection. And I've been writing short stories. They each have a shade of color in the title. And the first one just came out. It's called Black Forest, but that was totally never on my radar to do anything like that before. I've not written novellas. I've not written these kinds of stories. I usually do romantic suspense. And so all of that stress sort of that we've all felt, it just sort of welled up inside of me and came up with new stories. And so
Are they darker stories?
interesting. I just had, rather than, I could either go crazy, that was one side, or the other side was figure out what to do.
Well, and that leads us perfectly to our second question. So now that you're motivated or not, are you being more creative? Has it helped your creativity, the craziness, as she started something totally new? So this time, let's start with Hannah. What do you think?
Well, do you see the sign behind me there? It says first chapter fun. So that was something totally unexpected that would not have happened had the pandemic not happened. So on, I think it was about March 15th, 14th, 15th, I was chatting with a few friends who had books, who also had a book coming out. So my 4th published, Sister Dear, that published in May. And we're all freaking out. So we've, you know, all of our events are being cancelled, library events and launches and just everything. Everything was just, yeah, that's not happening. That's not happening. That's not happening. And we were chatting, thinking, what can we do? How can we help promote? How can we help one another as well? And that's what the writing community is about as well, is helping one another. And I said jokingly, what if I read the first chapter of your books online? Thinking, you know, maybe 5 or 6 people would agree to this nonsense, to trust me with their books. And within 2 days, I had 40 people lined up. So I read, and this, I mentioned this before we went live, I read for 53 days in a row. I did my hair and makeup for 53 days in a row, people. What the heck was I thinking? 53 days in a row, because I couldn't go on like looking like a scarecrow. So I read on Instagram and Facebook Live at the same time. It's very steep learning curve, doing graphics and all this stuff and uploading it and finding the best way and blah, blah. And every day at 11:30, first chapter fun happened at 11:30 Eastern time until May the 8th. Cue the wonderful Hank Philippi Ryan, who contacted me and said, "Seen your first chapter fun." And I featured her, read for her, and she said, "What are you going to do after the 8th of May?" I said, "Well, I'm going to stop it. I've got a book coming out, and my editor expects me to write." And she said, "Well, what if we did it together?" So as of May the 12th, her and I read twice a week, every Tuesday and every Thursday on Facebook, at First Chapter Fun is the group, and on Instagram, also at First Chapter Fun. And we read the first chapter of other people's books, not ours, although we've read from each other's, but not, she read from Sister Dear, I read from The First to Lie that came out on August the 4th. And we have bookings up to next summer, I think.
Wow.
We have 1,800 members on Facebook. We have 600 followers on Instagram, and that's all organic. We haven't advertised. And the whole point was, when I started it, was to give people and myself was also my escape every day for 53 in a row, to give people a place where they could come and escape from everything else and just listen to the first chapter of a different book and discover new to them authors. So now it's at 12:30 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday and Thursday, the days with the tea. But that would not have happened without the pandemic. And Hank and I we met very briefly at BoucherCon last year, and now we're great friends and we talk to one another a lot. So those kinds of things, they're the silver lining out of all of this. And there are more, but that is one specific thing. And actually this sign here, a fan of First Chapter Fun, an avid listener, made it for us, along with the mug. So,
That's awesome.
so sweet, so lovely. So that's definitely been a plus point. That was a very long answer. I apologize.
That's okay. I wrote it down because I hadn't heard of it before, so I've got it written down. I'll
Come
check
join
it
us.
out.
It's fun. We fluff the lines. You know, I got to swear online the other day because it was in the text. It was in the text. It was in the text.
You gotta read it. It's in the tag. There you go.
So it's really fun.
Yeah,
Anybody
I agree with like what Hannah said. I think one of the silver lines, somebody mentioned this in the chat too, is there's a lot more accessibility for people that, you know, they can go to conferences that they either couldn't afford in the past. You know, I probably couldn't have done $400 this year. And, you know, it's kind of nice. And also, I mean, Facebook, as much as it stinks sometimes because it makes you crazy, it does have a really good book community. And there's a lot of book groups you can follow. I belong to like a couple cozy mystery ones, and they're so supportive in that they want to help the authors. So even in this time when they know the authors aren't going to be able to, you know, get out and go places. I've had several, you know, where you do an author takeover for 2 hours and you just kind of sell your book like you would at a bookstore, just to all the Facebook people. And I think that's, I haven't written as much as I wanted to, but I feel like I've done more marketing, if that makes sense. Like I've done a lot more marketing of the current book than I maybe would have done if it was exclusively in-person events, because it's not necessarily, my book isn't by, you know, one of the big five, and it's not in Barnes and Noble, so you can't really go to an event like that. So I think that might be the only silver lining at the moment for pandemic, if you can say that.
I agree with Nicole. I have a lot of events now that are going virtual. I get to attend other Sister in Crime chapter meetings, which I never would have been able to do. I joined the Sacramento chapter just because they were having so many fun events. I was like, what the heck? It's been great. I give lectures. I used to do them in person here in San Diego to senior groups particularly. Now suddenly I get to do virtual ones, which is fun. However, I also have gotten more writing done than any year past, which is wonderful. I've actually submitted short stories to magazines and stuff, and I'm still waiting to hear because they take forever, of course. But hey, I've never tried that before. And now suddenly I'm, you know, trying new things and experimenting and writing more, and it's been kind of fun. It's a tarnished silver lining because I think we're all getting a little tired of virtual events. There's so many offered. I'm finding like my Sisters in Crime group, people are like, well, I could come to it, but I just got off another meeting and then a yoga thing and then this, and there's so many opportunities now, which wasn't true when we first started. But imagine if we were locked in our houses back in the 80s or 90s or even early 2000s without the technology available to us, the connectivity, the ability to do things face to face. I mean, my reading critique meets by Zoom and we love it. You know, yes, we miss being in person, but this lets us continue and do wonderful things.
It makes you think of like Agatha Christie. Like, how did she, like, we have all this technology and stuff, but they had nothing when she was writing. So how did she motivate herself, you know? Right. And longhand, right? Like,
oh, yes.
And Jane Austen, you know, like same thing. It's like, it fascinates me. I wish we could go back in time and figure out like how annoyed they got with each other, like in the house.
Have you ever seen where Margaret Mitchell wrote Gone with the Wind?
Yes, she's in a little tiny typewriter and she's huddled over, and then she'd hide it because she was embarrassed that she was writing a book. When you go to her house, they point out the little tiny space that she
tiny little house. Yep.
And you're just like, oh my God, and that little tiny space stuck all the time for how long she worked on that. I mean,
and that bed that she and her husband shared was so little.
What's
You
that?
know, but those ladies writing their books by hand before any kind of machinery, they would have had to peel potatoes or run the staff or do some, you know, crochet, which I think would be like going to hell. So, yeah, I think writing by hand would be way better than that. But I didn't say one of my great motivations. I'm the treasurer of the NorCal Sisters in Crime, and our president, Susan Bickford, who's got a panel coming up today or tomorrow, she started a write-in. She runs a write-in 3 times a day. I see there are people who come to it in the chat. I go to the 1 o'clock, and it was so fantastic being with people with our mics turned off writing. And you feel like you have to show up, and then you show up, and then you get so into your writing you don't stop at the end. But I liked it so well, I opened the same thing 3 times a week with my Napa Valley people. And I'm with senior citizens, by the way. So, you know, we're a bunch of retirees writing our opuses. And so it's an amazing thing to cheer you up. It's social, yet you're getting your work done.
Yeah, that's
I really,
very
really
cool.
like that.
So with this pandemic, we've had to change our writing schedule. That was a perfect lead into writing schedules. We got to change our writing schedules, things that we do and things that we don't do. So let's talk about how it's changed in your current writing schedule. James, why don't you go first? Go ahead.
That was it was an interesting question because for me it's tougher I think in a situation like this when we're stuck at home so much, it gets to be an issue for everyone that's in the house as well as you. Because if you've got kids who are being homeschooled, then that's going to affect your schedule. If you've got, and my wife is a writer as well, but she suffers more than I do because she used to go out to write a lot. There's a lot of people who like to go out for breakfast or for lunch and have a meal, and whereas I'm always quite happy to be home because it's less than 2 yards from the kettle. So I can always get tea. Whereas you can't get a decent cup of tea out here that I found. So I would always work quite happily at home and she would go out and work, which was great. But then suddenly she's at home and I'm at home and we were both like, wait a minute, what are you doing here? You know, so there was an element of that. And also we were early morning, late night. I'm sure that we all have schedules like that as well, where you're best in the morning or you're best late at night. I'm really good really late at night. And I managed to do it a lot when I got motivated. But when I wasn't especially motivated, or if I'd watched the news or, you know, had some bad news, you know, certainly in my industry, I do a lot of travel writing for in-flight magazines. And they're basically all gone. There's really probably going to be no physical in-flight magazines anymore. They'll all be digital. And sometimes if you happen to work late at night, and I'm sure it's the same if you get up early, it's actually hard to motivate yourself. You're like, why am I going to stay up now when it's midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, like I usually do, when I could just go to sleep because tomorrow's going to be the same day. So it was just, you just have to adjust with everyone that's around you and try and make going out of the house, I found, especially for a walk, doing any exercise of any kind, absolutely vital. You've got to, even if it's just the post box to post a letter, if you get outside into some fresh air and try and avoid, as we've already talked about, the staring at a screen all day. You know, you work on the screen all day, then you get off the screen and then you watch Netflix on the screen again.
Yes.
And it's like, try not to do that. I've never read so many books. That's the good side. And now, if any book comes up, anyone mentions any book in any context, no matter whether it's someone I know or I've never heard of, I can order it now or get it from the library straight away. And I don't think twice about doing it because I've got the time to do it now as a schedule. Whereas before you didn't have that time.
Right. True. Anybody else want to chime in on their schedule changes?
I ended up doing something kind of creative that wasn't writing. I ended up every morning for 7 weeks finishing a project I had started years ago and then stopped. I was mosaic tiling the entire front porch of my house.
Oh, cool.
Little tiny broken pieces of tile, placing them and then doing it. And so I finally finished this project that I had sort of gotten so discouraged that I had just completed left, and it was this half-finished thing that I'd see every time I'd go outside my front door.
Right.
And so a few weeks after the thing, I was like, you know what? Forget it. It's hot in the afternoon, so in the mornings I'll go out there for a couple hours and I will place tiles. I was exhausted afterwards, but I got that creativity and I got the satisfaction of now having it done. It's out there and done. And then I would come in and have lunch, and then I would write. And it's amazing. I mean, I finally got to accomplish something that I've been putting off for years.
And it uses a different part of your brain as well. If you do something, like so many people were baking, getting into gardening. We've just gone into gardening a bit, just herbs and some onions.
One of those stupid people who started the sourdough. I've got a sourdough thing. Her name is Doe Barrick, and I feed her once a week.
Yeah, but it's a completely different part of your brain that you wouldn't necessarily do. It's like model kit cars or something. You wouldn't necessarily do that now, but when you have this time, you think, I want to switch my brain off and use my hands. That's something that doesn't involve my brain.
Right.
Exactly. I do more gardening. I mean, I always like to garden, and I've always done that. And I often get myself thinking about what I want to be writing, and then I go out in the garden. I call it composting. And while I'm not actively thinking, when I get back to my computer, ideas start coming, things come. But the big change for me in this era of reduced circumstances, I have to plan our menu much more closely. And, eating, I refuse to give up buying organic, okay? So I have to plan everything and come up with really creative meals. So I put on, we canceled the cable. I know I sound like I'm changing the subject. We canceled the cable and went onto a Roku stick, and I've got a great streaming service of music, and I crank up the music and I dance and cook every evening between 6 and 7. And so I'm getting my exercise, and I'm making meals I probably would never have thought of, and learning new cuisines. And
Cocktails, that's another one. Cocktails.
oh yes, well, I make the cocktail first, and then I start to dance.
Yeah.
I kept a journal at the beginning of the cocktails I was creating.
Yeah.
And that was kind of fun. So, I'm not having an unhappy time about this. I am blessed. I've got a relatively large property. That's relative. But I'm down a dirt lane with large properties around me. So it's like I'm in the country, and I've got wildlife, and I can walk on my lane and not wear a mask.
That's always nice. Anybody else want to chime in on their schedule changes?
I want to mention something that Susan Brown many years ago suggested. She's an author. She's been a New York Times bestselling author. And I took her advice years ago, and I found that it sort of saved me during this pandemic. But she doesn't have an office in her home. She has an office outside of her home. Not like a she shed, but an actual office. Now, I can't afford to do that, but her point was remove yourself from the rest of your life and keep yourself on a schedule. And I found that when I started doing that, and I did many of the things that you all have suggested so far, which I've always done, and during the pandemic, they have really served me well. But that is get up in the morning. The time varies a little bit, but I have dogs, and so the dogs have to go out every day. We have to go for a walk every morning. We have to eat every morning. And then I make myself, and this is hard during the pandemic. I wonder if you all do this too. I have to force myself when I get up in the morning to make sure I don't just lie around in my pajamas and slippers. It's
really
so easy to do. And so
I do it every day.
do the dog walks outside. We're outdoors a long time usually. Come in, have some breakfast, and then because I've made myself get dressed in grown-up clothes, and I come into my office and I sit down and start to work and stay on a schedule as best I can. And I've done that ever since I heard her say that, and it has helped me so much. I think I said Susan, it's Sandra Brown, you know, Sandra Brown. And I just keep doing it. And of course, every now and then it gets discombobbled and the day doesn't work out that way. But if I don't treat it like a job and don't treat it like it's professional and it's important, then it never happens. A million other things come up, like Netflix. That happens instead. So
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And Keith on the chat said the same thing. I mean, with my first book and writing the second book, I could go to Starbucks, I could go to Panera, and I could sit in Barnes and Noble and just sit. And I was away from my TV, I was away from my cats, I was away from my books, and I could actually. And I said, let's do 1,000 words today. Boom, and an hour later, I was done. I think I'm having a problem with the scheduling because of that. Like, I can't do what I used to do. And it's going to be a lot harder now because it's getting cold out up here in New England. And during the summer, I could at least go on my deck and, again, just unplug and just write. But yeah, it's when you can't go anywhere to write, you get a little anxious about where to write. And like this desk chair is not comfortable, and then my couch is too comfortable, and then I don't want to write in bed because the TV is there. And so yeah, for me it's been hard. I'm not even gonna lie. I know a lot of people have had that. I'm trying. I keep every day I wake up and I'm like, today's the day. I'm gonna write. I'm gonna get comfortable. I'm gonna do it. And I've written 2,000 words like since the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm still learning. So we'll see what happens.
But the libraries are closed is really tough as well.
That's hard. Yeah.
The libraries are really closed because there's only so much you can research online. And I'm sure everyone here and everyone in the chat and everyone who likes to go to libraries in any case. But for them to be closed and movie theaters is really tough for a place to get away. Mm-hmm. Or to secrete yourself or lose yourself. That's been really hard not to have the library because I always feel like I work more in a library because there's less distractions, apart from all the books. But
I found this was already pre-pandemic. This was even before I wrote creatively. I used to run an IT recruitment company in Europe, and ever since I can remember, I have always functioned or been far more creative if I have deadlines. So I set my own, but I make them really tough. I don't make them, I'll do 50 words today. No, you won't. So, I'll get my diary, and this all goes into when I'm planning a novel. So I'll look at my diary and what have I got going on and kids' schedule and whatnot. Okay, so these are the days where I won't make 2,000 or 3,000 words, and every other day you better believe you're going to make it. And I feel bad if I don't, and I need to stick to that. Nobody's imposing this schedule on me, but I find that and some people hate deadlines. They'll just stick their heads in the sand or run away screaming. But for me, I don't just like meeting them, I like beating them. And it's just it's like it's just really weird. And that's what keeps me motivated is to be able to, and I remember my boss said this once, he said, you really like to be able to put a check mark next to your to-do list. I said, yeah, you're right, I do. Because I feel it gives me, I accomplished something. So if I can stick to those deadlines, and sometimes I have to reshuffle them because, life and pandemic and all the rest of it. But that has really worked for me. And I fully understand that does not work for everyone, but it really does for me.
I take my to-do list just to cross them off so that I could feel happy about it.
Yeah.
And Hannah, there's two lines I like about deadlines. One is deadlines, if they weren't serious, they wouldn't have the word dead in them. Then the other one, of course, is the Douglas Adams line. I love deadlines. I love the sound of them whooshing past me.
Also true.
So those are sort of the two versions of how you feel about deadlines. I need deadlines. This is one of the reasons I like NaNoWriMo, because I have this arbitrary deadline that's stuck on me and I have to write, 2,000 or more words a day if I'm going to manage, because there's always a few days when it's not going to work because of other scheduled things like Thanksgiving. I don't write on Thanksgiving. So I have to add time, to cover that. And yeah, deadlines are the only way you can get through things. And I found that out in my dissertation because I took abnormally long to finish my PhD, and that was partly because I had no deadlines. And then me and my chair were having difficulties. So when the department decided to replace her because we really weren't getting along, the new one said, okay, so every month you're going to hand me a new chapter. You're then going to revise it. You'll be done in a year. And I was like, oh. And if I didn't, and she says, if you don't meet the deadlines, you're out. And I finished in a year. After years and years and years of struggling because my chair and I were butting heads, and I was living out of the city of where I'd been getting my degree, so I'd moved away, and I was unmotivated and unable to complete and struggling, and then deadline, and just...
Kim, at UGA, our deadline was 11 years, and you wouldn't believe how many students I knew who went up to 10.5 years before they finished.
I was at a year 11, and my department said, what's wrong? And I said, well, actually, I'm having problems with my chair. They went to my chair, and her response was, oh, she hasn't dropped out yet? So they came back to me and said, we're getting you a new chair. And I said, oh, thank you. I didn't want to complain because I felt like I deserved what she was doing to me, but it was so awful.
You know, talking about deadlines, you mentioned the great writing deadline maker of NaNoWriMo, and if I might, I would like to say that our chapter, NorCal, of Sisters in Crime is going to be putting on various opportunities for writers during NaNoWriMo, and many for people who are not members. So be sure to look for Sisters in Crime Northern California and find out what we're doing, and we'll have things up on the website probably within...
That's great, Anna.
So.
I run a local Facebook group for NaNoWriMo every year, and if you got the Sisters in Crime toolkit, I was the one who put together the tips page.
Oh, did you? Well, of course, we're using some of that. Yeah. And just dovetailing, it took me 7 years. They finally said, my thesis chair said, okay, you have to be done by June, whatever, and it was April 1st. And of course, 7 years later, on the day I finished my thesis and got my degree. So
somebody in the chat window said, well, how do you do it all with kids? And I'm telling you, I give kudos to people who have kids, because I retired at the end of last year after 33 years of teaching kindergarten and first grade. And I did the online thing from March on. And now I'm having to be the other side because I'm doing it for both my grandchildren. And I'm like, oh my God, you parents out there, you need just kudos of kudos, because trying to do anything and help kids with my grandson's doing rounding to the 100,000th place. Do you know the last time I had to round to the 100,000th place? I'm like looking it up on Google. How do you do this in order to do it? Oh, it's just a crazy time. Well, so are any of you going to put the pandemic in a novel, or we're going to be stuck at 2019, skip over and go to 21? What do you think? Go ahead, Hannah. What are you going to do?
Well, the one that comes out, and I'll take a quick step back. I don't know if any of you saw this review that was bouncing around social media. Somebody had reviewed a historical novel that had a dual timeline. It was partially set in 1920 maybe, and then in present day. And the reviewer absolutely slammed it for not including the pandemic, and it published in June. So, you know, for anybody out there, we don't write that fast. No, we don't. If something publishes today, it was probably handed in to a publisher about a year ago, before all this nonsense started. The one that comes out next year does not feature the pandemic, because I handed it in January. But the one I'm writing for 2022, it is post-pandemic, and I'm actually using it because, very briefly, the main character has put a hit out on his wife, because have you spent 6 months cooped up with anyone recently? So I'm using that as I don't go into it, the detail. I don't talk about the pandemic, but it's just, this is what kickstarted this whole reason why I'm going to get rid of her. So, but I know a lot of people who are struggling with this, with books that are coming out next year or afterwards. Do we just set them in 2019, or do we just pretend that it never happened, or that it's a few years after and everything's fine, but we don't yet know what that will look like because we're not there yet?
I think it also depends on the type of book you're writing. So I think for like a suspense or a thriller, those always feel to me a little more realistic than, for example, a cozy like mine. It's kind of in that idyllic world. So the first 3 books in the series happened all during the same season. So it happened during 2019 because that's 2018 because that's when I start. Well, technically 2016 when I started it, but you get it. Speaking of deadlines, and I don't know if going forward after book 3, if I would ever consciously do it. It might be a little like maybe here and there. Oh, maybe they don't have they don't handshake. They elbow bump now or whatever. But I consciously, as a cozy person, I know some of the shows I watch. I'm watching a lot of the British murder mysteries right now because it's an escape from the poop storm that the world is right now. So I think, like I said, I think it depends on the type of book. I know for a cozy, I wouldn't put it in, or at least overtly, because they don't want to read that.
I certainly wouldn't want to read about how miserable it's been as a reminder, because I go to a book to try and escape and go to a different place or to meet characters and things I've never seen before. To see something that reminds me of that, because it's not a historical book, so you're not talking about the Second World War.
Right.
It's something that's different. I don't necessarily want to read about it, but that's why I love doing stuff from history. Because 100 years ago, you bought poison at the corner store. There's enough stories just from that. You don't have to worry about, social contact or distancing or gas masks because people have been killing themselves forever. So I can stop. Exactly. I've got a date now. 2020 is anything I can ever write up to 2020, and then I don't have to worry about it.
I think it will be interesting to see in like 10 years, 20 years, if historical novels and mysteries are more pandemic focused. Because I know I haven't read a ton of books, fiction about the 1918 flu. There's been a couple, but not a ton. And so I'm wondering if pandemics just don't lend itself to kind of that.
Skip it.
Because really it's just people being stupid. That's why we're in a pandemic, know? Yeah. And nobody wants to read about people being stupid. They want to read about evil people or good people. And, I think that's kind of hard too.
A couple of years ago, I came up with a plot for 1918 pandemic, and I am going to get to it because it's part of a series, and it's like the 3rd book in the series. I'm still working on the 1st one, and I keep going now. I'm like, oh shoot, everyone's going to think I was inspired by the 2020 pandemic to write this, and this was well before I ever knew we were going to live through this again.
The only one I can think of is Susan Messner's As Bright as Heaven, which is a really great novel set in Philadelphia during the 1918 pandemic, but that's the only one that comes to mind. Based on a real pandemic.
I'm reading The Weight of Ink. Can't remember the author at the moment. It's set partially more or less contemporary in England. Well, it's all in England. And in the 1600s, it's when the Jewish people, Inquisition's still going on, and they've gotten out of Portugal, and they're opening up London, and it's during the plague. So it's got the pandemic idea going, and it's fascinating to read this. She's a scholar. It's a very literary work about this thick, and I've been reading it all year. So, but I'll let you know how it is when I get done. I'm almost done. And
that reminds me, I have a YA that I've written that I've sitting in my virtual drawer somewhere that does actually feature a virus. And I wrote this a few years ago and put it on hold. And this virus targets the old and the sick.
Oh, well.
So, I might have to change that.
No.
Did you say the Dean Koontz book, maybe somebody remembers the name of it, that he wrote many years ago, I think in the 80s or 90s, and he talked about this pandemic in the future.
Yeah, I think I read that one.
And he described it perfectly.
Yeah, 'cause
And
it
I
was-
loved reading pandemic books before the pandemic happened, like
Right.
Station 11 and The Wanderers. And then after it happened, I'm like, oh, I don't know. That's just too close.
Yeah. I don't
Somebody
really
in
want to
chat
read,
just mentioned one called A Beautiful Poison. I haven't read that one.
I don't
we
want to
have-
read
we have-
pandemic stories, I gotta say, especially right now.
No.
But it's weird. San Diego's doing a Decameron project. Do you remember that the original Decameron was set in people who were trying to get away from the plague, and then they tell each other stories every night? And so they're soliciting short stories from people set in our plague times. And I'm trying to write one right now, and it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be turning this in the deadline of November 1st, because just writing about people adjusting their masks and doing stuff is not making me happy.
Yeah.
It's the end of zombie movies.
Downward slide again, that creativity and motivation.
I am gonna write about the pandemic in the past in my third book in my novella collection, but I'm making it a past event. So they mentioned it, so that way I don't have to deal with it
In real time.
the way it is right now.
All right, we just got our 5-minute warning, so I want to make sure to say thank you to the panelists and maybe quickly, just real quick, talk about what's next for you. What's next for you, okay? Because we only have 5 minutes. Let's start with Nicole. What's next for you?
Oh, goodness. Book 2 in the Ballpark Mysteries will be out hopefully in the spring. If you're on my Facebook group and my Twitter and everything, I'm hoping I'll have a cover in the next few weeks, fingers crossed. And also, just as a shout out, I am the Sisters in Crime New England and Mystery Writers New England social media person, and the Crime Bake is free this year, the New England Crime Bake. It is a 2-hour virtual event for free, and you can go to the newenglandcrimebake.org to sign up.
Cool. Linda, what's next for you?
Next is Gold Mountain. Black Forest just came out. Gold Mountain is out soon, and Blue Ice after that.
Very cool. Kim?
Well, I hope to have more short stories. We'll see. I have 2 works in progress, a cozy and historical mystery set in 1914 New York. So I go back and forth between those 2 because I can't seem to concentrate on one project at a time. And hopefully both of those will get going and out. And 2023 San Diego BoucherCon. Nicole, talking about creativity, I loved the flash fiction thing with the 10 words. Limitations on your creativity actually can make you more creative. I had so much fun doing that.
It's so Flash Words was so fun. Yeah, loved it.
All right. How about you, James? What's next?
For me, it's. I know the buttons are important for these things. The Alaskan Blonde, that's the book that's coming out next year. And then after that, I don't know whether I want to do something that's true crime again, because this is pretty exhausting, or try something that's a little more fictional. But at the moment, it's the Alaskan Blonde, as I'm putting all my my work into that.
Very
And I wanted to plug, I am the host for the book club at the Last Bookstore in LA, which I'm sure any of you who've been in LA probably know the Last Bookstore. It's a really good true crime book club, and they're all online now, so anyone in the world can come to it. So if you like true crime, Last Bookstore is a good one.
cool. Great. Hannah?
Well, Sister Dear is my 4th. That published in May and actually published yesterday in the Commonwealth. So that was really fun. And You Will Remember Me publishes next May, another dark story with a I'm told jaw-dropping ending, which apparently I'm getting a bit of a reputation for. So that's okay. And I'm working on the one for 2022. So that'll keep me out of trouble for a bit.
Perfect. And Anne?
My audiobook of Setup, the first book in the Jade Ann Stone Mexico Adventures, it should be coming out in the next month. I'm trying to learn how to market. And I'll be done by the end of the month with book 3 of this series, and starting November 1st. The 4th book, I'll start the 4th book. It does not even have a working title yet, but it is going to have something to do with Jade Ann taking a trafficked teenager, trafficked from LA, back to the United States. They're going to have to jump the border. Ooh. And I went to Tijuana right before Left Coast Crime, and I interviewed people at immigrant centers to find out how people do things like this. It was really fascinating and really was a test of my Spanish.
I bet. And for me, my third in my science fiction is out in another month called Dawn of Decision. So it was great, all of you. We have like, I don't know, 30 seconds left or whatever. But thank you.
Thank you. You're great.
Well done, Peggy. That's great.
Thank you, Peggy.
See you
Well done, Peggy. Perfect
virtually on
timing.
the next one. And thanks for the hint on how to see everybody.
Yeah.
I'll have to try that with the next panel instead of one
That's
person at a time. Go to Zoom Direct. All right. I think. Are we out?
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for
Bye, virtual.
Bye.
Guys.
Bye, Shadow Man.
waving until.
All right. Thanks, everybody.